Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Chris here, CG Aviator, back with the mighty Vulcan, and in this video I'll be landing this aircraft at Roswell, New Mexico via an approach that was known as the Widow Maker. It is the high ILS runway 21 at Kilo Romeo Oscar Whiskey. And I couldn't find any details of any crashes that occurred because of this approach, but the approach is certainly challenging, especially for an aircraft of this vintage and size, in the fact that there are lots of radials to intercept and high rates of descent, and having to fly into the ILS, and not to mention the different types of avionics that we have here. But the other things I'll cover in this video is, as well as the autopilot, is the MFS system, so the Flight Director or Military Flight System, the TACAN, which is here. We've got the beam compass, which is here, and the director horizon, which is here. So this is the high ILS runway 21. It's a 2010 plate because I don't think this is in effect anymore. It is for an ILS, which is 1099, channel 36 X-ray. Approach course 215 degrees. The runway is 13,000 feet long, which is quite a size. The touchdown zone elevation 3,632 feet. The approach itself is based on the Chisholm Vortac, so Charlie Mike Echo, which is 1161 or channel 108 X-ray. We'll be inbound along the 260 radial to the initial approach fix, which is Jenham at 10 miles, at which point we could do a right-hand turn into the holding pattern. We're not going to, but that's where we'd start that. We'll then press into 5 miles, which is where it says turn to the right and intercept the 360 radial outbound towards 11 miles. At 11 miles, we'll be descending from 15,000 feet down to not above 8,000 by the 020 radial, and then down to 6,500 feet. I'm going to be flying this approach at 250 knots, more of that in a moment. And I've also figured out the turn radius of this aircraft is about 4 miles, give or take, with the lag in the autopilot. So we'll start our descent at 11 miles. We'll start our turn onto a 16-mile arc at 12 miles. And I'm going to use about a 10-degree nose down gradient because we're losing probably 7,000 feet from 15 down to 8 in the space of about 10 miles once you allow for the fact that we've got a little bit on that 360 radial and about 5 miles on the arc itself. I could probably get away with 7 degrees, but 10 degrees keeps it absolutely safe to achieve that 8,000 feet. We'll continue down towards the lead radial, which is 043, and then it'll be a right-hand turn to intercept the ILS localizer inbound 215. Once we're intercepted, we can get onto 5,400 feet by the final approach fix, which is 7 miles based on 36 X-ray. So let's have a talk about how we've set things up in Cockpit. So we're currently at 15,000 feet on 1013, which happens to be the QNH and the standard pressure setting. We're at 250 knots with about 75% RPM to hold that. We are at 31 miles on the TACAN with the bearing of the TACAN 260. The heading of the aircraft is the circular white needle here in the 12 o'clock, which is pointing at 260. Therefore, we're inbound on the TACAN. Down to the right hand side you can see we've got altitude hold pulled, we've got track pulled, and the autopilot is engaged. If we have a look at the MFS selector up here, we've got the TACAN in the 12 o'clock, so it's tracking the TACAN. We've got height selected here, and then we'll slide across to the director horizon, which shows everything level, the yellow bars being the flight director indications, and everything's, like I say, level. In terms of the beam compass though, so this is really unusual, but the important things I kind of mentioned, the white circle being the heading of the aircraft, the numbers around the outside don't change. So we could be heading 120, but it would still say 260 in the 12 o'clock unless I change the dial around the outside. We've also got a heading reference, which is this bug here, so we can use that for the autopilot function shortly, and you can see I put it on north so that we intercept the 360. And I think that's all we need at the moment. So the next event will be 10 miles for the initial approach fix and then 5 miles to start our right turn. So whilst I've got a minute, let's talk about some of the calculations that I've gone through. These will be fairly complicated, and if you've got any questions, feel free to put those in the comments below. But we are currently flying at 250 knots. To make maths easy, 240 knots is 4 miles a minute. But because that's indicated airspeed, our true airspeed is actually quite a bit faster than that, because if you hold the same indicated airspeed, as you climb up, the air is less dense, and therefore you need to be faster in order to get the same dynamic pressure in the pitot probe in order for the indicated airspeed to read the same. So a very, very rough rule of thumb is if we take our current miles a minute on the indicated airspeed, it's about 4 miles a minute, and we multiply it by our thousands of feet in altitude, which is 15. 15 times 4 is 60. Now if we add 60 onto our 250, it gets 310 knots, which is close to 5 miles a minute, which we could time if we, now that it clicked over to 15 miles on the TACAN, if we waited a minute, we'd likely be seeing 10 miles, which would be our initial approach fix. So why have I calculated my ground speed? Well, the other rule of thumb I kind of go to for rate 1 turn radius is if I divide my ground speed in knots by 100, so if it's 310, I get 3.1. I think that maths is correct. 3.1 miles is my turn radius around about a rate 1 turn-ish. All approximate, okay? So when it comes to turning onto the arc, I need to give it at least 3.1 miles to turn from outbound on the 360 to a 90-degree right turn onto 16 miles. But because there's a delay in the system, roll rates and whatnot, I've rounded that all the way up to 4 miles, which is why I'm going to start my turn onto the arc at 12 miles. Cool. With me so far? Happy days. Out of interest, we're just about to click over to 10 miles. Any time now. There we go. I'll time that, and in post-edit I'll see how close I've got to that 5 miles a minute estimated. Alright, we're now 7 miles, waiting for 5 miles, and that's the right-hand turn. In order to turn right, I'm going to change this selector, the MFS selector, over to bomb, which is heading. And because we're following the track, we've already got track selected down here, it should turn right onto the heading bug. We're at 6 miles, getting ready, here we go. Okay, so the aircraft is banking to the right. You'll see the white circular needle start to move to the right as the heading changes, noting that the numbers around the outside don't change. That still messes me up. So now that it's turning right based on the heading, I'm going to set my beam compass to be 360. That's the wrong way, Chris. My goodness. And you'll notice that the heading reference actually changes, so the numbers are changing because the needle stays where it is. But we'll fix that in a minute. Okay, north. Now I'll click this out and change the heading reference to 320. You'll notice that the angular bank demanded is reducing because the heading is aligning with the heading reference. And we're now inbound on an intercept heading for the 360 radial. Whew. But we don't have any TACAN indications over here. We have them here. You'll see the tail end of the TACAN needle is going through 025. We're at 4 miles away from the station, so we know that the station is behind us. We're heading north-ish. The full-scale deflection of the TACAN, I think, is 5 degrees. It usually is. So when the tail end of this needle gets 5 degrees away from north, which is the radial that we want, I'll flick the MFS selector over to TACAN, and we'll notice the course deviation bar start to move. Here we go. So TACAN, moving over here. The bar is starting to come in. The aircraft goes, okay, I'm following the TACAN. It's going to turn right and intercept it. Good so far. Now our altimeter is set, it's 1013, ready to descend at 11 miles. So we've got 7 miles for 11 miles, that's 4 miles, which is less than a minute. What I want this aircraft to do is roll out so I can deselect track and start playing around with the beam compass to set it up for the ILS. And the reason for that is so that I don't have to do it whilst I'm intercepting the ILS, because it's a lot of scrolling to do. That's 8 miles, and wings are level. Let's disable track. Here we go. Have to act pretty quick. 215. We need to start descending at 11 miles, so keep your eye on the TACAN to the right hand side. We'll use airspeed hold to do that. Oh, we've got seconds, only seconds. Right, let's pop this out. Let's put east. Let's put 100 actually. Right, we'll start descending. So disable altitude hold, move it onto airspeed hold, pull the power. Oh, it gets busy. 12 miles is when we need to start going around the corner, so we'll select heading, which is bomb. We'll pull the track knob there on the autopilot, so it'll start going to the right, he says, hopefully. Having pulled the power, we've got more than a 4,000 foot rate of descent. We've got 10 degrees at least nose down, which is all groovy, and we should be rolling out on a heading of 100. We're 14,000 feet for 8,000, and we need to be lower than 8,000 feet by the time the tail end of the needle gets to 020. Are you with me so far? If not, rewind it, watch it again. It happens really quickly. Okay, now this is where a bit more mental gymnastic or spatial awareness happens. So normally the TACAN needle will be on here, and we just put the TACAN needle perpendicular to our heading, and that way we're following a 16-degree arc, a 16-mile arc. Over here, we need to figure out what 90 degrees off of the tail of the needle is. So if it's north, it's 090, but because we're arcing around the corner, it'll keep moving, which is why I've selected 100, and we'll just keep doing in like 10 or 20 degree increments as we go. Alright, we've rolled out 100. We are at 15 miles. We're going to hold this 100 until this trips up to 16. Now it's nice and prompt to get the turn on, which is good, but it's put me slightly inside the 16-mile arc. That's not a problem. 1 mile here, there, not a problem. We are currently on 012, 013 on the heading, and we're at 8,000 feet. So I'm putting the power on just to slow the rate of descent down, and you'll see the nose of the aircraft start to raise as the power comes on and the rate of descent decreases, and we're looking for 6,500 feet. Mackin is now 16 miles, 90 degrees off is 120. I'll change my heading to 120. So what I'll do is we approach 6,500 feet, I'll disable the airspeed hold. In fact, I'll do that now. Change it to altitude hold. In fact, let's disable the autopilot as well. A bit late on that, so a bit of a yug to hold 6,500 feet. Heading's good, altitude's good. I'm happy if the speed comes back a little bit because we'll go towards pattern speed. Okay, we're doing alright. What I want to do is get this autopilot engaged at 6,500 feet. Done. And done. I think, I hope. Okay, we're 16 miles, 90 degrees off, that's 120. We're holding 120. I'll probably rotate it round another 10 degrees so we stay ahead of it. Pattern speed for this is 160 knots, so I'll keep that trickling back through 190 knots. And the next event is the lead radial at 043. So when the tail end of the tack needle gets to 043. 180 knots, let's go for landing lights. Not taxi lights, landing lights. And we're still at 16 miles. Good. 130 heading. Good. Radial we're on 035. Excellent. Altitude hold is good. Pattern speed. We're all sensible. Excellent stuff. I've also set the rad out on, so the rad out's here. You get an undercarriage warning at 160 knots. It's fair enough. I don't want to put the undercarriage down yet because we're 16 miles away. There we go. So I put the rad out on, which is on here, and I've set 400 on the height, so I just get a light when I get to my decision altitude-ish. All rough stuff. Okay, 040 on the heading. On the radial. We need a right-hand turn in about 2 degrees time, which will take not very long at all. Might be able to see the airfield out there somewhere. Not yet. Okay, let's start coming around to the right. So we're using the heading bug. We'll give ourselves at least a 30-degree cut, maybe slightly more. Now this is where, in my previous practices, it's just not intercepted in time. So what I'm looking to do is intercept the localizer, get down to 5,400 feet in good time, such that I'm ready for my 7-mile topper drop. You see the airfield out there now. But we don't have a reference to the ILS yet because we're still on heading, so what I'll do is flick this over to localizer. I will stop the track and I'll probably fly this bit a little bit manually. Autopilot. Okay, we're localizer established. You can see the course bar coming in. I tripped over the MFS selector to localizer. Down to 5,400 feet, keeping the speed under control. And if I get the chance, I'll re-engage the autopilot and just see if I can get it to follow the ILS down for a little bit anyway. Okay, speed's under control. We're descending down to 5,400 feet. We need to come back to 140 knots eventually. We'll change the MFS selector over to GP and approach. Okay, it's reminding me about the gear. Tell you what, I'll put the gear down. So gear's coming down, 3 reds. And a reminder, 140 knots. Okay, this is where I start getting tense. We're almost there. We are almost there. 5,400 feet. 150 knots. I'm happy with that. Let's try and trim this out. So let's review the setup for the ILS. We have 1099 dialed in. we have 36 X-ray, which is automatically paired, so we're not going to use the range from Chisholm, but if you look lower right of the beam compass, you'll just about make out a distance gauge, and that is the distance for the ILS. So it's 7 miles. That'll give us our top of descent, and we'll follow the flight director vertical path in order to descend down on the ILS. Kind of simple stuff. I'll play out the rest of this approach in real time, but feel free to skip ahead as you wish. Okay, everything is going reasonably. Looks like the glide path is live. Happy days. I want that down, I want track on, I want glide on. Right, where are we? Don't get distracted. 140 knots. What I'll do is I'll pop one stage of the air brakes out once I start descending, which is very soon. A little bit right of track. A little bit low. You see the yellow horizontal bar in the director compass is just about matching the circle of the aircraft symbol. Okay, there's the flap. I accidentally pressed the gear, but they're still green. We're looking for about an 800-foot rate of descent at this speed. And we're going down 4,000 feet for the decision altitude. Sounds like a marker beacon. Right, let's see what this autopilot does. Pilot engaged. Glide, track. If it starts going funny, I will take over again. Otherwise, I'll use it for a bit of a breather. Looks sensible. Okay, we need 140 knots, 130 by the threshold. Here's my parachute, not parachute, the brake chute. So flick it down to enable it. I think it's 130 knots, and then flick that switch up to cut it by 60 knots, I think. We're holding slightly left, which is fine. Got 600 feet till our decision altitude, and that's enough autopilot. I'm going to fly the rest. Thank you very much. We're almost at the end of the video. If you've liked it, hit that like button. If you've got any questions, please put those in the comments. This has been one heck of a challenge. 4,300 feet. A little bit low. Speed's good. Oh, going a bit high now. Follow that flight director. (4,200 feet). 4,100 feet. Set the radial up so it should give me kind of a hint. There's the green light. There's 4,000 feet, decision land. I'm going to select another stage of speed brake or air brake. 130 knots. Don't get slow, don't get low. I am aiming towards the near side of the runway, which is why I'm going low on the glide path. Just my technique. Come on. Welcome to Roswell, New Mexico. Idle, flare. Hit me down. Sounds like it. Shoots out. That's pretty neat. As well down. Find some brakes. Let's discard the chute. There we go. Well, thanks very much for watching. Till the next time, take care. Fly safe.